we want to drink milk, then we have to bother to maintain a cow and keep her fit to supply milk. Drinking milk is very nice. It is also pleasure. But for the sake of drinking milk, one has to accept so much trouble. The yoga system, as here stated by the Lord, is meant to end all material happiness and material distress. The best yoga, as taught in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna, is Bhakti Yoga. It is also mentioned in the Gita that one should try to be tolerant and not be disturbed by material happiness or distress. Of course, one may say that he is not disturbed by material happiness, but he does not know that just after one enjoys so called material happiness, material distress will follow. This is the law of the material world. Lord Kapila states that the yoga system is the science of the spirit. One practices yoga in order to attain perfection on the spiritual platform. There is no question of material happiness or distress. It is transcendental. Lord Kapila will eventually explain how it is transcendental, but the preliminary introduction is given here. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudai Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So as we see here in this purport, Prabhupada in the beginning, he's describing that we are all hankering after material happiness. But as soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. So in this material world, we are just juggling between temporary material happiness and temporary material distress. I came across a very nice article by Her Grace Urmila Mataji, and I was reading through it and I thought I'd summarize some points from there. It started with the definition of material pleasure or material happiness, which, as Prabhupada also describes, is the temporary absence of suffering, which we think is material, so material pleasure. And as Prabhupada has said, this world is a world of duality. So we cannot understand material pleasure without material distress, and we cannot understand material distress without material pleasure. That is why this material world is called a relative world. But that article, and I summarized these 3 points, Mataji very nicely explained. It was kind of characteristics of material pleasure. How do we understand material pleasure? So the first characteristic of material pleasure that was described there was that the definition of material pleasure can be understood in terms of prior sufferings, which means we get material pleasure by eating food. We cannot enjoy that food unless we have felt the pangs of hunger or the pain of hunger. If there was no concept of appetite or hunger, then no matter how good the food would be, we would not enjoy or derive material pleasure out of it. Unless there was a concept of fatigue, tiredness, the pleasure we derive from sleep would not be there. Unless the concept of pain from loneliness and boredom was not there, we would not enjoy the company of devotees or any social company for that matter. So, material pleasure has been defined in terms of prior sufferings. That is one characteristic of material pleasure. The second characteristic of material pleasure is that material pleasure, it demands that we take intermittent breaks from it so that we can continue to enjoy it. So we eat, we are full. We cannot keep on infinitely eating. We have to take a break, let the appetite come back, feel the hunger again. Then when we go back to eating, it will give us some more pleasure. But we cannot keep on enjoying material happiness without taking breaks. And actually, this back and forth of intermittent breaks from material pleasure and then going back to it to continue to derive pleasure from it is what we call bhoga tyaga, sense enjoyment and renunciation, sense enjoyment and renunciation. And it is described in the preface of Nectar of Devotion that it is impossible for a living entity living in this material world to continue to steadily be either in renunciation or be in material sense pleasure enjoyment. We cannot do either of this steadily and continuously. So those intermittent breaks are necessary. And even when we take these intermittent breaks to continue to derive pleasure, the more we engage in that activity, the pleasure that comes keeps on decreasing. That we have always heard material pleasure. The more we experience it, the pleasure from it keeps on decreasing. And it was very beautiful how Narad Muni has very simply described it with this one analogy of a flower. Material pleasure is like a flower. While it is fresh, we love it and enjoy it, but it becomes disgusting when it is rotten. So material pleasure is like that. Initially, it is fresh and it is giving us pleasure, but as it starts to rot and become stale, we find it disgusting. And Srila Prabhupada has also said, in those lines that any material subject matter, right, for that matter, we cannot keep on engaging in it or hearing continuously about it. There will come a point where it becomes distasteful. So similarly, Prabhupada here in this purport, he is describing how to get, for the Sheena Sukha, there is Mahar Dukha. How to get this little bit of pleasure from milk, we have to maintain a cow, right? It is, and that is true, right? So Srila Prabhupada he's explaining we have to go through so much suffering to get this little bit of material happiness, and even that doesn't stay for very long. And there is reference to the Bhagavad Gita here, how Krishna has described that material happiness and material distress, they go hands in hand, right? 2.14 Matra Sparsha Sukhandeya Shitashno Sukha Dukkada Agama Pai Yastam Titi Shaksva Bharata. Just like the changing of seasons, there is material happiness and material distress. Until we can come to a point where we can transcend this, we have to tolerate it. Because as long as we are in this material world, this combination of material happiness and distress, like changing seasons, is an inseparable part of our lives. And it is also an inevitable part of our life. We cannot ignore it. We have to tolerate it till we transcend it. And I was hearing and reading about a few pastimes of Srila Prabhupada where he sheds some more light on this temporary nature of material happiness and distress. There is a pastime where Prabhupada was walking on the beaches of Hawaii with his disciples, and he saw some people surfing in the ocean. So he asked them, what are they doing? So his disciples, the American disciples, they explained that, Prabhupada, this is a sport called surfing, where you mount on a surfboard and then you try to ride the big waves without falling. You have to balance, and it's a sport that people derive a lot of pleasure in, those who engage in it. And Prabhupada made a comment that, are they surfers or are they sufferers? he said that these people are spending all of their lives working so hard trying to make money, and then at the end of it, to derive few moments of material pleasure, they are spending their time, money, energy, and their precious human life here to surf in the water and do what? Getting acclimatized and habituated to the life of a fish. So these people, because they are finding pleasure in riding the waves and becoming habituated to water, next life they will become tiny fishes, and then they will be eaten by bigger fishes or sharks, and hence they will continue in this material cycle of birth and death, and this rut of birth, death, old age, and disease. So are they surfers or are they sufferers? And to that context, we can relate to our material lives also, right? Living entities who are living in this material world, trying to, get happiness, and then there is intermittent distress, and again we are trying to get happiness. It is like trying to chew the chew with the hope that the next bite will not be as distasteful as the previous ones. Now, if I bake a cake and instead of sugar, I add salt in it, um, and I take a slice of it and I eat it and it's not sweet. So I think, okay, let me try to take a slice from the other corner of the cake, but that is not sweet either. So then I try the third corner and it is not sweet either, because the main component is wrong. I mean, I'm trying to find happiness, I'm trying to find sweetness in a cake that lacks it. So similarly, and again, going back to the article that I was reading on Mataji, she said that living entities are looking for that kind of everlasting, ever increasing. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha ki Jai, Nitai Patita Pavan Gaura Hari ki Jai. So similarly, we human beings are trying to find that eternal, everlasting happiness that is not combined with suffering. And the reason we are trying to find it alludes to the fact that there may exist this kind of happiness which is not coupled with suffering, right? There may exist. But why are we looking for it? Why don't we have it? It is because we living entities, as we know, we are not this body, but as Krishna explains, that we are these eternal spiritual entities that are unnaturally encased in this body made up of matter in this world of matter. So what is happening is, and again, our spiritual heritage, as Srila Rupa Goswami has explained, our spiritual heritage includes varieties and flavors of interactions and loving interactions, devotional interactions with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And those interactions that we've had in the past, and we have an impression of it, they've given us the kind of happiness that we're looking for, which is everlasting, full of bliss, and not coupled by any sufferings or not temporary. So we are trying to find that because it is within our very nature, but we are not being able to get it here, because just like an a forest dwelling animal, if he is put in a desert, he craves for water and shade. Similarly, we living entities, having this experience, having this rich heritage of experience of loving devotional service, we are trying to crave for that everlasting happiness, but in a place which lacks it absolutely. Which is why we are trying to look for it here, but we don't get it. Again, going to another pastime of Srila Prabhupada, he was walking on a beach with a group of disciples, and he saw very tiny crabs on the shore. And he asked the very mighty and hefty Brahmananda Maharaj back then, he asked him, can you catch one of these crabs? So he immediately went to pick one of them up, and before he realized, the crab went deep inside a hole in the sand. So Prabhupada was like, oh, you couldn't catch it? And then the crab came back up. And then Prabhupada was like, try again. And he tried to catch it again, but the crab again went deep inside the hole in this mighty, and this crab is so puny, but still you are not being able to catch it. Why? Because it is taking shelter of this mighty ocean and its banks, which is mightier than you. So even though the crab is weaker than you, but it's taking shelter of something that is mightier than you, which is why you're not being able to defeat the crab. So following this analogy of crab going into the hole to protect itself, we also can have this concept, this principle of holes in our life that can protect us from the fangs of Maya. And what is the definition of those holes? HOLES. H here stands for hearing, and we cannot assert it enough how important hearing is, as the basis, as the foundation of the spiritual institution that we are a part of. It is said that our soul has three kinds of Shakti inherent to it. First one is Jnana Shakti, second one is Ichha Shakti, and third one is Kriya Shakti. So when we start hearing from a bona fide source, first the Jnana Shakti is activated. We get knowledge when we hear. And when we get knowledge about something, then Ichha Shakti is activated. We desire to achieve what that knowledge is trying to tell us. And once the Ichha Shakti, the desire comes, then Kriya Shakti is activated. Then we will do action to achieve that desire, to achieve that result that we attained the jnana of. And it is very important to hear from a bona fide source, or an authentic source. Why? Because it is not just the words that that come to us when we hear from a bona fide source. When we hear, the consciousness of the person is also transported to us. And not just the words and the consciousness, but the faith that that person has in the subject matter that he's speaking about also gets transported to us. And it is this consciousness and the faith that comes with the words is what transforms us. And we can see in the life of Srila Prabhupada very clearly. He went all alone to this foreign land of America. What did he have? He had faith in Krishna Bhakti. And who was his audience? His audience were hippies and Americans who had faith in sense gratification. But Srila Prabhupada's faith in Krishna Bhakti, the strength of it, the altitude of it, was deeper and higher than the faith of those hippies in sense gratification. That is why Prabhupada was able to transfer his consciousness and his faith into them, but he did not get impact. Right? So that, like I said, we cannot assert enough how much hearing from a bona fide source is important. And that is the first step for the holes that we can have in our life to protect. The second O stands for observation. So on the basis of what we have heard from this bona fide source that we may want to follow, we start observing them very closely. And we have realized, right, all the sadhus, the maharajas, temple presidents, everybody who are preaching to us, who we feel inspired by, we observe them very closely. Especially preachers in ISKCON, leaders in ISKCON, are observed through magnifying glasses. Because with observation, we can understand, we can learn about their conduct. And that conduct will help us transform people. One time, I was hearing this in one of Amog, his Amog Leela Prabhu's lecture, and he was sharing that one person was out preaching, and he told somebody, our mantra, philosophy, is chant and be happy. So this person said, okay, I want to see how you chant and how you are happy. He invited him for the Mangla Aarti program in the morning. And after the Mangla Aarti, this person who preached sat down to chant. And while he was chanting, he was struggling to stay awake, and he was falling asleep. Then again he's getting up, and again he's drowsing off. So after the chanting session, this guest who had come, he asked him, "You said your philosophy is chant and be happy, but I saw you were struggling. Where is the happiness?" So he said, chant and be happy is the summarized philosophy. The expanded philosophy is chant, struggle, and then tomorrow you will get that happiness. But the happiness that you get will be very deep, will be very elevated, will be everlasting. And Srila Prabhupada, again, he sent neophyte American disciples to places like Russia and Japan, right? The disciples asked, "Prabhupada, how are we ever going to preach to the masses when we don't even know their language?" Prabhupada said, "Through your conduct." And we have this famous saying that actions speak louder than words. So through our action, we can transfer more than we can transfer just through our words. And again, Srila Prabhupada's example, right? The hippies, the Americans, they learned and got transformed through his conduct. They saw how Prabhupada was lovingly cooking for them. They saw his conduct in it. They saw how Prabhupada was giving classes, how Prabhupada was leading kirtans, how Prabhupada was doing the various activities in devotional service. They learned more through his conduct when they started to observe him closely. Amoglila Prabhuji was telling a story where a person became a devotee and started chanting 16 rounds within a month. And he was inspired by this one conduct that we have in our organization, which is Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. The person was inspired by this culture of how we offer obeisances and respects to Vaishnavas. And that transformed him to become a devotee and go to 16 rounds within a month. So conduct is very, very deep and very, very important, and it can have a very lasting impact. So that observing is the second. Hearing, observing. Then L of the wholes. L is learning. So now we heard, we observed. Now comes learning. Now we have to go deep into the subject matter. This is, and I can say it applies to me also to such a large extent. But many of us, we understand the basic philosophy. Okay, we are not this body, we are the soul. I have to chant 16 rounds and follow 4 regulative principles, and stay away from 6 anarthas, and these very surface level things, and we think that will suffice in our Krishna conscious life. But that is not true. Learning stands for going deeper into the subject matter. And Srila Prabhupada very early on stressed that we should have courses like Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Why? Obviously, it was implemented later by his disciples and the members of the institute. But Prabhupada stressed the importance of these studies, these courses very early on, because he's stressing that we have to go deep into the learning. If we remain surface level devotees, and again, I'm speaking to myself, it is very easy for Maya to attack us. We may have seen in Discovery Channel, National Geographic Channel, I don't remember the name of the birds, but there are a few birds that will be just hovering over the surface of water bodies, and it will be looking for fishes that are swimming on the surface. Now, a bird cannot swim in the water. So the scope of its attack is limited to the length of its beak. But the fishes that are floating on the surface level are easy attacks. It will catch that fish and make it its food. So similarly, for surface level devotees who do not understand the importance of deep learning and going deep into the subject matter, they are prone to attack by Maya, repeated attacks by Maya. We can only get deep immunity by going deep into the subject matter, by not floating on the surface, but by floating deep into the water, where these birds cannot catch us. So that is the L for the wholes. And again, intelligence, I was hearing, intelligence is made up of ahankar and rajas. These together make up intelligence. So it is on us how we uplift our intelligence to the level of goodness, sattva. There are two routes we can take. Either we can make this intelligence our strength, or we can make it our weakness. If we engage our strength in engaging in question answers, in hearing Hari Katha, in hearing from the Vaishnavas, Sadhus, Maharajas, then intelligence will become our strength. But if we let intelligence lead us into the subject matter that it wants to wander into aimlessly, and we become a disciple of our intelligence, then it will become our weakness. So we have to make sure we make intelligence our strength. So H, hearing, O, observing, L, learning, E. E is experience or experimenting. So we heard about the subject matter, we observed sadhus who are speaking on it, we went deep into the subject matter. Now we want to live it, we want to experience it. One time, Srila Prabhupada told one of his disciples, I have the power to liberate you right here, right now. The disciple was very, please do that, Prabhupada, please do that. If my Guru Maharaj told me that, or if Golokeshwari Prabhuji tells one of us, I have the power to do that, then the natural next reaction would be, please do it, Prabhu, why are you not doing it? But Prabhupada said, no, I will not do it. Then the disciple asked, why, Prabhupada? If you can do it, why not right here, right now? Then Prabhupada said, because I want you to travel through this sweet struggle of advancing in Krishna consciousness. Because the real rasa, the real sweetness is being able to go deep into the subject matter and live it. Actually, even in terms of material activities, the more deeply and passionately one is involved in any activity or subject matter, the more pleasure they derive out of it. One example is one of my father-in-law's friend. He lives here in Michigan. We meet him sometimes in a year, few times in a year. He'll be turning 70 this month, and every time we meet him, more than half of the time in our conversation goes in hearing about birding. He is very passionate about birding. I didn't even know there's a hobby called birding. Only from him I understood. And birding is, you go to different places in the world, go deep into the forest to just watch certain species of birds. That's it. And last time I met him, he was explaining, I think he went to Peru. Again, if I could go to Peru, I cannot imagine the different things I will want to do. And he is explaining how he used the few days that he had. One of the days it was raining, bad weather, and this forest where this particular species of bird probably was to be found, it had a big hike of a few miles. This almost 70-year-old person is walking with a guide in this rainy weather. He walked like some 3.5 hours or something, he said. He went into the forest. He waited 4 hours. He's just waiting for the bird to come. When the bird comes, they watch the bird. I don't know how long, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And they have to walk back down, and that is birding. And he's so passionate about it. When he speaks about it, there's twinkles in his eyes, and I don't get all of it, but I'm sure he's deriving a lot of pleasure, which is why he's spending so much time, energy, money at this age, going to different parts of the world, using those days to watch a bird for 10 minutes. So similarly, if we think of spiritual subject matters too, right? If we go deep into it, when we start living it, then we will derive the real pleasure from it. That is why, the E, it stands for experiencing it. Because again, if we don't go so deep and experience that sweet struggle, then we will not get that rasa. Then eventually we end up being frustrated, because then neither we enjoyed Maya nor we got Sham, and we were stuck in the middle. So it's a failed attempt, right? So that is why this sweet struggle is very important for us to go through. And probably that is why Krishna is making us, I mean, he also has the power to deliver us right here, right now, right? We have the deities here. It's Krishna himself, there's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. We can get delivered right here, right now. But they want us to go through this sweet struggle because that will make us get that real rasa of Krishna consciousness. And then this is so H, hearing, O, observing, L, learning, E, experiencing or experimenting, and S, holds. S is spreading the word. Now, when we have heard enough, we have observed enough, we have learned the subject matter so deeply, and we have lived it, we cannot help but spread the word. Tell others how this has transformed me and how it can transform them, right? Preaching, we may preach and we don't know if the other person really was convinced or if they were really hearing us or not. But we heard what we were talking. So it helped us, right? Somebody may come, they'll ask, where is Krishna? I'll say, there is Krishna. They may not believe, they go away. But once more, I said, there is Krishna. It deepened my faith a little bit that there is Krishna. He's standing there, right? Even in book distribution activities, sometimes, and this happens with me also, before we start, we think, what if this person doesn't read the book that I spent so much effort trying to give him with or without a donation? I traveled so much, and then what if they just, put it in the corner of their house and nobody gets to it? No, we don't have to worry about it. We have to see how that will strengthen our faith, that activity, right? They say teachers learn twice. So when we preach or teach, doesn't matter whether the other person is benefiting from it or not. We are definitely benefiting at that moment because we are reasserting and reasserting to ourselves that yes, this is true and I believe in it. So spreading the word is the S of the whole. Srila Prabhupada was asked, what will happen to this movement of yours, Prabhupada, once you disappear from this material world? And he said, he was asked, what will happen to your disciples? He said, they will all become hippies again if they do not preach. So spreading the word is very important for us also to be able to continue, seal the hole with the S by spreading the word so that fangs of Maya cannot attack us. And again, here in the purport, we read that Krishna says Bhakti Yoga is the highest, right? But then there is the complaint that Krishna, you gave us all the instructions, you're not telling us how to abide by it, how to follow it. How do I do it? How do I do it? Then Krishna said, okay, he came to us as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to show us how to follow what his instructions, were given to us. He came as a devotee, as the topmost devotee of Radha Rani. He showed us through devotional service that he performed how to do the same. He gave us the holy name that we should chant to be able to get this Bhakti Yoga. So that complaint has also been addressed, right? And Chaitanya Chandramrita, I unfortunately couldn't bring the verse here with me, but I was reading it's text 5. It says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's so merciful, Mahavadanyaya, he's so merciful that by his one glance, he can deliver us. And that verse was saying, it was basically telling us what is the proof that his one glance has delivered us. There are 3 points to it. The first point is the desire to become one with the God, to merge with the God, will become so distasteful that it will feel worse than going to a hellish planet. That is first proof that his glance has delivered us. The second proof is the desire to enjoy the bestest of heavenly planets and pleasures will not bother us. We won't care about those desires and pleasures. That is the second point of proof. And the third and the most important point, which again relates to this This words and this concept of temporary material happiness and distress. The third proof is with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's one glance, with his mercy, this, this envious, deeply rooted desire for sense gratification that we have to run after this temporary happiness and then get temporary distress also, that will be eliminated. That will go away. Just like when the poisonous fangs of a snake are removed, the snake becomes harmless. Similarly, with one glance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can get his mercy, through which this very, very envious and deep-rooted desire, our hankering for this temporary happiness will be completely uprooted. And I would like to end by sharing a couple pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where we can see this happening, right? Narayani Devi, right? She was 4-year-old when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in, I think, Srivas Thakur's house, he revealed that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he asked Narayani to chant. And that 4-year-old unschooled girl, we would think, what does she know? She started rolling on the floor and a tear started flowing down her eyes and she started chanting. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with his one glance, only one glance, he gave her love of Godhead. 4-year-old child, right? And Narayani is the mother of Vrindavan Das Thakur, right? Who has written Chaitanya Bhagavat. So we can see with one glance how much benediction, how much mercy, how much transformation can be brought into a person. Another example we all know, right, of Vasudev Vipra. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was on his tour of South India, he went to this house of a Brahmana. And when Vasudev Vipra heard about it, and we all know, right, Vasudev Vipra, he had very advanced stage of leprosy. So much so that maggots were living in his open wounds. And he was so compassionate that if any of the maggots would fall down, he would pick it up and put it back on his body because they were feeding from that blood and pus on his body from those open wounds. So he somehow made it to the house of that Brahmana to get a glimpse of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he heard that Mahaprabhu has left from that place. And he was so disappointed that he fainted over there. And even though Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had walked away considerable amount of distance, he came back to deliver Vasudev Vipra. And how did he do it? By just his one glance. He glanced upon him, he embraced him, and Vasudev Vipra's disease was gone, and he got this beautiful body of a young man. So we have proved, we have seen how by just a glance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is so magnanimous, we can be delivered from this hankering of temporary happiness, and how we can transcend this cycle of temporary happiness and distress that we see in this material world. And today and tomorrow is the celebration. The deity that we have here, Patita Pavan God Hari, he is real Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is present here. He is here to give us that glance of mercy. And it is on us to come and engage in his loving devotional service today and tomorrow, so that we can be a subject of his magnanimous glance, and through that we can get love of God. Thank you very much. I would just like to ask forgiveness for anything that I spoke which was beyond my means and capacity. I did share a lot, which applies to me also, has to probably apply to me first before I can share, but I received specific instructions to share instructions. So I was only following instruction in trying to share these very big instructions. And again, like I said, teachers learn twice. So I'm just hoping that, by meditating on some of these instructions and by repeating it, I can develop more faith in it, that one day I'll also be able to achieve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's merciful glance and transform my life. And I pray the same for each one of you here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
You have anything on Zoom?
Any questions? Mataji, Prabhuji, Prabhuji?
Thank you so much for a wonderful class, Golokeshwari Devi. Hari Hari Bol. Very happy to hear you. Chai.
Madhuji, thank you so much for a very enlightening class. I was just remembering one thing which I heard is, it is known when person open their mouth to understand how deep they are. I was personally touched with wonderful examples you shared. The example of a crab, because that crab is taking a shelter of something higher, and that's why even at our level we can't get there. Second thing which I liked in the class, you talked about Prabhupada talking about surfer or sufferers. It is such a deep realization actually thinking that way, which part we belong to. And I also like the formula about the holes. Just wanted to add on that, especially on the spreading part. I was hearing his Grace Radheshyam Prabhu's class, and he was talking about, the topic was absorption in Krishna. And the first slide he said, our understanding is absorption means, oh, I close my eyes and I see Krishna is eating from the lunchbox and all that stuff. But actually, interestingly, the whole class one was on spreading Krishna consciousness, preaching. So when you shared that whole formula, I was just remembering that. Really grateful to you for sharing these wonderful insights.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for helping add to it and making it even more deep, Prabhuji. Very grateful.
Thank you for sharing that birdie thing. I didn't know it either, but I could realize if I was not in Krishna consciousness, I might have been ended up.
We might have been birding somewhere in the jungle. Sorry, Prabhuji.
One very important point which touched me, Mataji, which kind of scared us well, that Prabhupada's answer, that like his statement that if we don't spread, we are going to go back to what we were.
Yes.
That kind of emphasize a lot on spreading, preaching, either through examples, either through words, whatever it may be. So that's a very strong.
Very true,
Thank you.
Prabhuji. That's like a warning.
It's like,
Very
yeah,
true,
if we
Prabhuji.
don't act on what we do, and the sequence is very nice, Mataji. You hear, because you're hearing, you observe, and because you observe, you start learning. When you learn, you experience, and if you actually experience it, you will spread, you will share. So thank you very much. It's very, very nice.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Mataji, excellent class. Thank you so much. You should give more classes. I had a small question, Mataji, out of my own ignorance. This whole thing that you told, Mataji, this is chronological or simultaneous? Like, you got it, right?
Yes. I heard this concept, Mataji, in one of Amok Leela Prabhu's class, and I can share it with you, Mataji. But according to him, it was chronological. It happens one after the other, because say, for example, learning is missing, then how do we experience it, right? If we have not learned enough, then how do we get that sweet struggle of experiencing the advancement in Krishna consciousness? We advance when we learn more. And if we have not experienced it, how will we understand that it is our duty to spread it also, not just for the sake of spreading, but to keep our battery charged? So the way I heard it, it was chronological, Madhuri. One is a natural next progression step to the other.
Okay, Mataji, got it. Thank you so much, Mataji. Really amazing, inspiring, and beautiful class. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you very much for the wonderful class.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you, Mataji.